This is a CBS News special report. I'm Scott Pelley in Los Angeles. We're on the air because news is breaking in Ukraine, and President Obama is about to make a statement in the White House briefing room. The U.S. has just said that it is, quote, gravely disturbed about reports of Russian troops entering a part of Ukraine called Crimea. Ukraine's ambassador to the United Nations told the Security Council today that Russian attack helicopters have landed in Crimea along with Russian transport planes. But it's hard to know exactly what this means because there are often Russian troop movements in Crimea. By treaty, the Russians have a large naval base on the Crimean coast. But given the revolution over the weekend that caused Ukraine's president to flee, these developments do appear ominous. Chief White House correspondent Major Garrett is in the briefing room. Major?
Scott, the President of the United States, President Barack Obama, last spoke to Vladimir Putin 1 week ago about the situation in Ukraine. Much has changed since then, and there's every indication we're going to hear the two leaders have spoken again. And Scott, what this is really about is measuring intentions and implications. As you said, the Russians do have some legitimate rights within Crimea that the United States government does recognize, but they also know that Ukraine is up for grabs politically and geopolitically. And the President wants to underscore today that the movements by Russian forces could be interpreted by the West, United States, Europe, and other countries as menacing to this interim transitional government in Ukraine, and he will urge the Russians to be cautious and transparent and open with not just the United States, but all those watching the situation so it doesn't spin out of control militarily or geopolitically.
Thank you very much, Major. We're just waiting for the president to walk into the podium right there behind Major in the White House briefing room. We anticipate the president will walk in through the door on the right in just one moment. Here he is now.
Good afternoon, everybody. Over the last several days, the United States has been responding to events as they unfold in Ukraine. Now, throughout this crisis, we have been very clear about one fundamental principle. The Ukrainian people deserve the opportunity to determine their own future. Together with our European allies, we have urged an end to the violence and encouraged Ukrainians to pursue a course in which they stabilize their country, forge a broad-based government, and move to elections this spring. I also spoke several days ago with President Putin, and my administration has been in daily communication with Russian officials. And we've made clear that they can be part of an international community's effort to support the stability and success of a united Ukraine going forward, which is not only in the interest of the people of Ukraine and the international community, but also in Russia's interests. However, we are now deeply concerned by reports of military movements taken by the Russian Federation inside of Ukraine. Russia has a historic relationship with Ukraine, including cultural and economic ties, and a military facility in Crimea. But any violation of Ukraine's sovereignty and territorial integrity would be deeply destabilizing, which is not in the interest of Ukraine, Russia, or Europe. It would represent a profound interference in matters that must be determined by the Ukrainian people. It would be a clear violation of Russia's commitment to respect the independence and sovereignty and borders of Ukraine and of international laws. And just days after the world came to Russia for the Olympic Games, it would invite the condemnation of nations around the world. And indeed, the United States will stand with the international community in affirming that there will be costs for any military intervention in Ukraine. The events of the past several months remind us of how difficult democracy can be in a country with deep divisions. But the Ukrainian people have also reminded us that human beings have a universal right to determine their own future. Right now, the situation remains very fluid. Vice President Biden just spoke with the Prime Minister of Ukraine to assure him that in this difficult moment, the United States supports his government's efforts and stands for the sovereignty, territorial integrity, and democratic future of Ukraine. I also commend the Ukrainian government's restraint and its commitment to uphold its international obligations. We will continue to coordinate closely with our European allies. We will continue to communicate directly with the Russian government, and we will continue to keep all of you in the press corps and the American people informed as events develop. Thanks very much.
The President of the United States speaking live from the White House on the rapidly developing events in Ukraine and that part of southern Ukraine known as Crimea, where Russian troops are said by the Ukrainian ambassador to the United Nations, Russian troops are said to have been moving into the Crimea. Now, the president wanted to speak about that and to essentially warn Russia that there will, as the president said, be costs to any invasion of that country. David Martin has been checking with his sources at the Pentagon and has some more details now on what these Russian troop movements might mean. David?
Well, Scott, a U.S. official confirms there are indications the Russians are moving troops both inside and into Crimea, and to put that more bluntly, the Russians are flying troops into Crimea. Exactly how many and what kind is still unclear, and that's very important because, as you noted earlier, Russia has a military base in Crimea, and it has treaty rights that allow it to take some movements to protect its bases. So, as we heard the president, he stopped short of calling this an invasion or even an intervention, but certainly these Russian troop movements would fit the category of provocative, which the U.S. has warned Russia against doing. So this has ratcheted up the pressure and is almost certainly the reason that the president felt compelled to come out and make a statement on the issue.
David Martin at the Pentagon. David, thank you very much. Let us put the map up for you one more time to show you exactly what we're talking about and to remind you of how all of this got started. That's Ukraine on the Russian border. Crimea, as you can see, is that peninsula down south on the Black Sea. You'll recall that over the weekend, a revolution essentially occurred in Ukraine, a popular uprising against the president there. The president fled and went to Russia. The area of the Crimea is largely Russian-speaking, and they have now taken advantage of the destabilization of the country and now are agitating in Crimea to become part of Russia again, which they were at one time. The capital of Ukraine, you can see right there, is Kiev, and our Clarissa Ward has been covering the revolution for us in Kiev. Clarissa, how is all of this going down there in the middle of the night?
Well, it is a very tense and very fluid situation. We know that on the ground in Crimea, large groups of these uniformed gunmen are going around. They've taken over the two main airports. They've taken over a TV station. And certainly this has people very nervous. These gunmen will not speak to journalists. They will not identify themselves. Their uniforms do not have insignias. And Russia has basically been completely silent on this, refusing to say whether or not these gunmen are in fact affiliated with or part of the Russian military. Ukraine's politicians, however, have not been so circumspect. They have said that this is a military invasion, and they have called on President Putin to stop his provocations. But at the same time, they're also appealing for calm, because at the end of the day, Ukrainians and Russians have to understand that neither side stands to win from any military provocation here.
Clarissa Ward in the Ukrainian capital of Kiev for us tonight. The president just a moment ago from the White House warned Russia there will be costs if Russia undertakes a military occupation or invasion of the part of Ukraine called the Crimea. We will have much more on this on the CBS Evening News. Bob Schieffer will be talking with Defense Secretary Chuck Hagel about developments in the Ukraine this Sunday on Face the Nation. We'll have the very latest on this rapidly developing story and a look at the big storms that are hitting the West Coast. All of that tonight on the CBS Evening News from Los Angeles. Until then, I'm Scott Pelley. See you soon.
For news 24 hours a day, go to CBSNews.com.